Remember, please hit like and subscribe for me. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go. Hi, everyone. Today is Thursday, January the 8th. I am back on the mainland of the US of A. And this is the Moneyball Morning Report for the Benzinga Pro platform. Taking a look at the E-mini S&P this morning, we've got sideways action, but on the daily chart, ooh, that's weekly, friend. What are you doing? Weekly chart pretty sideways. Daily chart pretty sideways as well. Upward trending formations give us dips being buy zones, and they continue to be buy zones. Here's what we have. We have formations that are dampening, and so dampening, if we use it as a weird geeky math term, it tells us that the bounce of the spring is slowing down. That's what dampening is called. And so today we might have ourselves a little bit of a pullback into forward pricing formations that sit around 6,900. 6,900 is our line in the sand. If we hold 69.11, 69.15, somewhere around there, we've got upside. So you're like, yeah, Marie, that sounds great. How in the world am I going to manage my risk if you are giving me zones that are, many points deep? What are we looking for? So let's think about the ideal setup for the day. What do we have? Daily chart. Upward formations, grinding higher, but giving those highs away, right? Into a higher low. So we know dips are buys, but they're not aggressive breakout formations where we don't go, hey, I'm buying the breakout. So that one for me, completely off the table on a daily formation. Let's go to the 30-minute. We're going to zone all the way in. Actually, no, let's do one better. Let's go to the 4-hour so that we can see what price action is giving us. So we've got a topping formation here, way to the left, December 11th. Another topping, December the 26th, and then one more topping, January the 7th. And so that would be yesterday. So what are we staring down? Support areas. And if we give them higher lows, my suspicion is that we could, we could come into 69.11. So if I'm saying, hey, what's my ideal trade for the day? That's the bounce of $6,911. If it does not come to me, there are other places I can trade, but that's my sweet spot. So what will I do? I'm going to put an alert there, right? We're going to let it come in pretty tight. I don't care how it comes in. I just want an alert there. That's going to be my happy place for the long in the ES. If you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, I like the short because we're coming into the January formations that tell us, hey, things are going to break down. We already have somewhat of a short in play, and that is because we've broken down through the inventory accumulation that occurred in the last couple of days, right? Wednesday and Tuesday's trading day. So we could say if we bounce and we cannot recover 69.75, that makes for another sweet spot that we can trade. So let's do that. 2 sweet spots, ideal high on larger time frames, broken support, so old support, new resistance formations. We'll put an alert right there, right? What's the goal? So the goal is every day come in and find an ideal setup. So if you see yourself playing in a space that is not ideal, you can come back and say, all right, let me see what's actually going on here. Let's pop this trend line forward and see where the trend break came. Wednesday, right? This is our 30-minute formation. Right now, underneath the 30-minute low, inventory accumulation sitting at 69.61. So we could bounce. Take a look at the sideways patch we've got going on, right? We've got the 0DT put support, 69.50. The 0DT call resistance, 69.85, okay? And we've got ourselves a couple of patterns that tell us, listen, bounces are likely to be sell zones. Our ideal 4-hour formation still not sitting anywhere near where price action is, so we can sit and wait. You want a 30-hour formation? 30-hour. 30-minute formation? We just failed this edge. So we've got resistance that became support, that gave us a higher high. into support that tested as resistance and now likely to bring us downward. So the trend formation says, hey, we could easily continue down into this ideal zone, or we could bounce right off our 69.35 area. That also creates a little bit of a bottoming formation if we sit sideways. So this could be an ancillary bounce, though I don't like it as much, right? So I'm going to put it all the way to the edge of sensitivity, make sure that if it touches the zone, we know it immediately, and we can watch for either the continuation down to 69.11 or the move back up to 69.75. That's what we're staring down today. Let's go to the NQ. Start of the daily, right? So actually, no, let's start the weekly. Start the weekly, we can see it's pretty sideways, right? Very, very noisy, but it's got upward trajectory. We take a look at the daily, same sort of thing, right? We have a dampening formation. With that dampening event, let's remove this ray. And let's go here. We've got the dampening formation that's still giving us higher lows, but it looks a little bit more like lower highs here, right? That doesn't mean that anything other than that is the formation that we're staring down. Momentum, a little bit mixed, so we see the candlesticks retracing each other. If we go to the 4 hour, we can see a little bit more of that. And let me do this. This looks a little bit noisy to me, yeah? Let's remove all the annotations. New year. Let's do it again. So we've got, if we look at it on the 30, and we go way back to the resistance zone, we've got 26,130 sitting at the top of the edge. You know, I would not mind an alert up here. Why? It gives me, oh, isn't that interesting? It gives me a little bit of an idea that price action is going to sit at the top of this range for resistance, or it could give us a brand new breakout. So let's use the trend, and we can see the trend is pretty sticky. We have a breakdown all the way to here, but we are looking at the same sort of motion that's given us a dampening formation. Dips are still buys, but they could be deeper. On the 4 hour, we don't see anything as pretty or as defined as what we saw in the ES, in the NQ. It's fairly jagged. And so what you want to do when it's jagged is look for those spots that have anchored VWAPs, the base of gaps, anything like that. So I'm looking at 25,600 or so. That's going to be an alert. That's the dip buying event for our 4 hour formation, if we hold trend. Now, notice we aren't very near the trend line. The trend line could dip much further down. We could really come all the way to the anchored VWAP event of the close of January the 2nd, right? So that gives us 25,429. Let's create an alert there. Again, we are in a dip buying zone, but our dips could be a little bit more significant, right? They could be. What are we staring down now in the pre-market motion? If we see a rise into the call wall at around 26,000, we want to watch to see what's going to go on there. I think that's a great place for an alert. Now, is it an alert long or an alert short? Well, based on the past, most likely it's an alert short. But if it comes down and tests 100 points below at this region of frontline support, we could easily have ourselves a nice bounce formation. And that happens to be yesterday's anchored VWAP closing event at 25,890. Okay, so if I were setting this up and it rose past 25,890, I would expect that it would go the next 110 points to 26,000. If it doesn't, that's your short. And the short action takes us down to the front line test of 25,598, at which point we say, all right, let's see if they defend that. If they don't, we get 25,429. If they do, that's the long zone. So the goal is, if it comes in here and price begins to bounce, then we've got the long. So we want to look for if and then, okay? It's not if we test it then, it's if and. So we look for price, we look for the behavior of the traders at price, and then we engage, okay? Let's take a look at micro Bitcoin. $95,000 really giving this one the business, right? 94,900. Let's set an alert there right away. We'll look at this 4-hour chart from this perspective. Could it break out? Yes. Do I think it's going to break out? No. But you guys know I am naturally bearish on Bitcoin events. Does mean I won't take it long. What are we seeing? Let's zoom out. When in doubt, zoom out. Here we are on the weekly. What's the trend? Well, that's higher. Can't argue with that. So dips or buys on the weekly formations. We're in heavy congestion. And so the break above 95,000 is going to be a big deal. Where will the test be? If it breaks above 95,000, we're going to test the big fat round number of 100, more than likely. And then, let's see where inventory, God, these inventory formations are so jagged. 110, 107. Those are going to be the zones we want to watch. All right, if we go into the daily, you can see what we've been doing over the daily is just moving from the bottom of support to the top of resistance. That gives us sideways pressure. So what are we looking for now that we're near the bottom? We're looking for buy zones that begin to hold themselves near heavy congestion. So what do we want? Let's move this one. Let's see where it is. Do we like this? Sticky, 86,000. That's going to be a sweet spot buy if it holds. Looks a trend line. That's our daily trend line event. This looks like a flag on the daily, right? We've got higher highs, kind of, and higher lows. Let's put an alert. Do we already have an alert on this one? No. Let's put an alert here. 95,000-ish. Breaks above there. Very easily we could have a breakout in the trend line to test the big fat round number of 100,000, right? You can see the inventory in accumulation from the daily perspective. If we go to our 30-minute chart, it looks very bearish, right? Trend line formations look terrible. We know support regions are below. Here's all this inventory accumulation. Oh, this is a very nice run up here. So what we're going to do is put a line at this zone near 90,990. We're going to create an alert. What that alert does is give us an idea that's going to show, all right, something could happen here. What's the alert tell us? Okay, the alert tells us, listen, I've got downward trend, downward momentum. I get up to 91,000. I could easily reject. Trend is down, momentum is in negative territory, all of those things telling us we've got downside pressure events. So first things first, you could easily say, I'm going to short it at 91,000 or 90,990, and your stop might be 91,050. It's very messy, okay? That gives us our first sell zone event. Now, if it breaks above that, then we get our buy point right there at that 91,000 into 92,800, but this anchored VWAP at 92,000 is going to sit in the way. So this is very noisy. My thought would be, if you're going to play in this very turbid water, I would say, wait for the big bounce for the sell zone, or if it holds this area above 91, you've got yourself a long that could easily work itself out into 95. Okay? What's the ideal buy zone? Am I going to say, I think it's at 85,000 and some change? If it comes there, I'm going to give it a go. That's going to be my sweet spot for the week. That's where I'm going to try and buy it. What do I want to do? If it heads to 95, and it begins a bounce. How do I want to do that? I want to see a look below and fail. Gets back above there. It's going to give me the opportunity to track back up into 90,000. That's what I like for the space. Potentially, it gives me the right back up to 95,000 if I'm trading it for several days in a row. Okay, so that's what I'm staring down for micro Bitcoin. Let's take a look at silver. Silver in a little bit of a fade spot. It's bouncing. It bounced really dramatically. As you know, I am relatively bearish on this product. However, holding above 75 is a gigantic line in the sand in terms of what I am staring down. Now, let's go to the weekly. And you can see that the price action is clearly bullish. Very, very bullish. So, dips or buys from a weekly perspective. That being said, we are incredibly far away from any kind of moving average, any kind of anchored VWAP from big volume. It's just really expanded dramatically. And so if we draw the wave from the last big volume day, which is really, several weeks ago, we can see that this number up here near 80 and 85 look to be a little troublesome in terms of a resistance zone. Our call walls and our put walls are much higher, and so the big put wall is at $70.30. We break that, we'll probably head down to 60, right? That's my thought. There's little to no volume here. It's very speculative accumulation. So you want to be super careful. Yes, you could say, hey, I'm buying the dip. Absolutely. Watch for the dip on the bigger time frames. Because if I look at a trend line on the daily and I try to connect as many points, that trend line is 60. Now, you can see the slope of momentum has aggressively changed between this trend line, lower, and the larger trend line. The larger trend line tells us, hey, in the near term, let's see if we can hold the 75 area and let it work. Okay? So, that being said, that's what we're staring down. Where do I want to put an alert? Of course, you know I'm going to put an alert near 75. Let's draw a line there. That's going to be the sweet spot. Actually, no. The sweet spot for the trade is going to be this 74.50 area, right? We're going to give it a little bit of room, but we're going to put an alert on here, all right? We're going to make it a little fatter so that we can see when it comes through. What do we want to do? If it tests the area and it bounces, comes up and recaptures the zone above $74.80, $75. It's very likely that we turn right around and bounce back into the frame. If we bounce, that means the long action gives us our support zone here at $74.50 or so. If we fail this area after the bounce, the trend line formations will send us down into 72.20 and the put support at 71. If we're staring down upside pressure, the volume point of control and put support for the 0 DTEs are around $77. That's your first target. Where might we see a big zone to give us our next line in the sand of resistance? Okay, shoulder, head, shoulder. That's pretty ugly, and it could also already be engaged. If that's an actual head and shoulders pattern on a 30-minute chart, the range 76 to 83 is $7. $7 from the break of that 76 puts us down at 69, which is very much closer to our big trend line number. Okay, so we're going to look, for me, I'm going to look for an alert on the sweet spot that says, do we get above 78 or do we get below 74? And if we don't get above, if we test 78.80, and we lose the area, we've got short action into the base. If we test 78.80 and we stay up above that, then we're going to walk from that 78 to 80 to 83 and beyond, right? That's what we're staring down right there. Okay, next, let's look at oil. Oil settling down just a wee bit. Let's take a look at the weekly. Right? Weekly price action still looks pretty awful, frankly, right? Albert Marco bought at the 55 level. So I am going to put an alert there and make that the sweet spot. Why am I talking about Albert? I think Albert has a pretty good idea of what's actually happening with oil. And this 55 area is a zone that we have to keep for a lot of reasons. If that breaks, we've got ourselves some problems. All right, so that being said, that's going to be my sweet spot. We are clearly far away from it at this juncture. We're more than $1 away from that price point, but I would love to see it as my zone. Where would I want to look for a shorting event? That one's a little sticky, so I suspect $58.50, which is pretty close to the 0 DTE call wall. The 0 DTE call wall being that 58.50 area. So I like that as a potential sweet spot for short. If I test 58.30 and I do not break down and lose 58, then I should have an upward shot into 61 and then into the point of control, which is 63. For now, I suspect that we are sitting between 55 and 58, so those are going to be my alert structures. From a 30-minute chart, if we're playing in between those edges, going to be a little bit messy. From the general formation, could you say, well, Anne-Marie, I want to buy 56. Okay, your stop would be 55.70. That's what I would say. Wait for price to come to you in oil. If you chase it, you are going to have a little bit of hurt sitting in your in your headspace. Okay. Are we bouncing to the top of this formation? Potentially, right? I would not be surprised to see us try and hold this level. If you want to look at 56, watch it recover. It's a fair buy zone. If you don't, you got $1 all the way down to 55 and some change. So that looks pretty good as well. Let's go to gold. Let's take a look at the weekly chart. Still very strong. Dips are solid buy zones, right? We've got pressure points of support sitting at 4,386. That looks like a very important zone to watch. Let's take a peek. We lost it several days ago and then recovered it. So it might be better to look at 4,300 as a really nice sweet spot for long action. But a relative formation, let's choose 1 hour here. Our 1 hour gives us a flag pattern. Oh, I don't want that. It's not a pretty flag pattern, okay? The bottoms are holding a little bit better than the tops, but this certainly looks like some kind of support edge to me, right? And that is a put wall that we're looking at. So let's look at 44.35 as a potential bounce zone, right? What do we want to see? Alert goes off. We want to see, I'm going to zoom down into tight time frame, and I lift above it, so I look below and fail. Gives me an upward draft into my resistance zone. My first pocket of resistance looks like 44.60, but it is messy. It is very, very messy. This one's pretty sticky. I would wait for these edges to show themselves out. We're going to look at 4,500. Why? That's a big fat round number. We get up above there. You know, we've got $20, $30 to the north. The call walls are pretty far away from us above there, so there's a lot of room to run. This is a bull flag, and so dips into deeper support will give us buy zones, right? And so if I stare down my 4-hour, what my real sweet spot looks like from a 4-hour perspective does look like 4,400. I am not sure that we pull back below that area under our geopolitical tensions that we have going on, right? I'm not seeing that particularly. And I do believe the metals are moving because of geopolitical tension. All right, lastly, let's take a look at SPY. Okay, SPY doing very nicely. 4-hour chart. This looks like a pattern that dips or buys. Where is a solid support structure? $686.80. Let's try and get close to that number. That's going to be a dip buying event if it bounces. If it doesn't, it's going to be a sell zone into the next line of heavy congestion. I suspect that that is the point of control, somewhere around $683. Let's go to the 30-minute and see if that makes any sense. Yes, it does. It's a gap fill zone. It's the VWAP action. We have a trend line break on the upward structure, right? There is our, let's draw another segment, make it a little bit better. We have a trend line break in the upward structure here, relatively speaking, right? So what the traders are trying to do is find the floor, and that $686 looks pretty good, even from a 30-minute formation. The next one would be the put wall, but if we're going to do what I suspect, if we lose 683, we get to 681, all right? We'll see how those work. Okay, that's it for me, folks. Really wanted to come in with the one good trade, set up a day for us moving forward. Let's hope my brain sort of remembers that sort of thing. And our upward pressure events still show areas that don't allow us to have clean breakout action and continuation. Everything is a brand new high that collapses and retraces into a prior higher low, which still gives the overall chart bullish momentum, but structurally right now the traders are trying to find support. 0 DTE support for the SPY looks like about 685. The big put wall, 680. The big call wall, 695 to 693. Somewhere around there. There's a lot of noise here. Okay, good luck trading. I'll see you on the streams.